What to do when an ideal marriage collapses because of one mistake. Carrie Ann, a nurse and mother of 3 children, lost her husband's trust, and all because of one mistake that completely turned her life upside down.
Some individuals believe that journaling is an effective form of self-reflection. At least, that's what my counselor recommends. So, I'm giving it a shot. After all, what do I have to lose that I haven't already? My name is Carrie Ann Walker. I'm a 35-year-old divorced mother of 3, twin boys who are 10 years old and an 8-year-old daughter. I have been working full-time as an emergency room nurse ever since I graduated from nursing school. Many people compliment my appearance, saying I could have pursued a modeling career. Standing 5 feet tall and weighing 100 pounds, I maintain a fit and healthy physique through regular exercise. I have reddish blonde hair and green eyes. Reflecting on my past relationships sometimes brings up mixed feelings, but I focus on the positive memories. I reside in a smaller city that also serves as the county seat. It has the energy of a larger city while maintaining the close-knit feel of a small town. The hospital where I work is the only one in the county, making it a significant facility. It's affiliated with the State University's medical school, attracting numerous student doctors who come here to train. The emergency room is always bustling, and I'm fortunate to work alongside many dedicated and talented colleagues. It was in this environment that I met my husband. When I first began working here, I hoped to find a partner who shared my values and goals. With each new group of medical students or incoming doctors, I observed and got to know them better. Some of my friends and I would invite these colleagues out for social gatherings after shifts, fostering camaraderie and connection. Over time, I formed close bonds with several of them. Ultimately, I was seeking a committed relationship, built on mutual respect and understanding. Married nurses often teased us, saying things like, we resembled eager matchmakers ready to play Cupid. One of those who lightheartedly joked with us was my friend Joni. Joni was married with 2 children. Her husband worked as a firefighter for the county fire department. They lived on her family's farm outside of town. Her mother managed the farm after Joni's father passed away a few years earlier. Her father was also a firefighter who tragically lost his life in the line of duty. He had rescued several individuals and went back into a burning building to search for more victims when the roof gave way. Although he successfully led his crew to safety, he couldn't save himself. The county erected a memorial in his honor and even named a park after him. Everyone recognized John Walker Sr. as a heroic figure, and his bravery left a lasting legacy. Johnny also had a brother, John Jr., who lived on the farm and followed in their father's footsteps. He became a paramedic firefighter and spent his days off working on the family farm. One afternoon, as I listened to Joni teasing us girls, I questioned her about her reluctance to see us marry doctors. Joni responded that she had no personal issues, but from her experience, every doctor she encountered here seemed weak. According to her, they'd never get their hands dirty and were merely searching for a young nurse to use as a trophy and to satisfy their own desires. She went on to say that she values a genuine man, someone who diligently works to support his family and would battle any evil to protect them. I countered that such men only exist in fairy tales. Joni replied that she thankfully lives that fairy tale every day, because that's exactly what her husband is like. She warned me that one day I might end up marrying a doctor, only to spend my life worrying about another nurse trying to steal him away. She pointed out how many doctors around us were divorced as evidence. This conversation made me reflect. I didn't want to become one of those wives anxiously waiting for their relationship to crumble. A few days later, I met her brother, John Jr., for the first time. He entered the ER with a patient, and I nearly stumbled. Standing around 6 feet tall, John was clearly a strong and well-built man, even in his uniform. His dark brown hair and hazel eyes added to his striking appearance, and he exuded confidence as he walked in. I'd never felt such an intense attraction to anyone before. Noticing his close bond with Joni, I inquired about him. Joni glanced at me and introduced him as her younger brother. Curious why I hadn't met him before, I asked Joni. She explained that he typically works on the rescue truck rather than the ambulance, but was covering for someone today. I expressed my desire to get to know him better. Joni paused, then said, "Look, Carrie, I consider you a friend, but I love my brother. I won't introduce you to him because I won't let you take advantage of him and then have him get hurt when the right doctor comes along." Frustrated, she told me to forget it and walked away. Determined, I ignored her advice and approached John to start a conversation. I can't even recall what I said, but by the time he left, I felt optimistic about making progress and believed we would cross paths again soon. Later that day, I encountered a few medics I knew and inquired about John, hinting at my interest in seeing more of him. They bit the bait and called John. From there, it was a waiting game to see if he would reach out to me. I must admit, I even had several passionate dreams about him. A few days later, Joni came up to me and mentioned that John had been asking about me. Curious, I asked her what she had told him. Joni responded that she had been honest, but added that John is old enough to decide if he wants to date me. Naturally, I was thrilled, but Joni warned me, saying, "Don't you dare mess things up. I would never forgive you if you did." Days went by without any word from John. Then, Joni invited me to a barbecue, assuring me that John would be there. What she didn't mention was that several single women would also be attending. Throughout the day at the BBQ, multiple women tried to capture John's attention. It became clear that I wasn't the only one interested in him. Finally, I saw my chance when John went inside to use the bathroom. I followed him, and as he came out, I asked if he was avoiding me. John replied, "I heard you wanted to get to know me, but Joni told me that you're focused on finding a doctor to marry. I don't want to compete with anyone for a woman's affection. Either she cares for me, and only me, or I'll move on." I responded, "Why do you think I can't care deeply for one person? That's exactly what I'm looking for. I want to build a meaningful relationship, start a family, and stay committed." John stared at me for a moment before saying, "Okay, if you want to go out, how about tomorrow evening?" I smiled and suggested, "How about tonight?" John agreed. Deciding he was worth the effort, I took things slow. We went on dates and enjoyed spending time together. After a few dates, I realized my feelings for him were growing stronger. By the sixth date, John and I discussed the future of our relationship. I told John that my feelings for him were serious and that I wasn't interested in casual dating. I needed clarity about where we were headed. Saying I had strong feelings barely scratched the surface. I was deeply in love with him. I had never met anyone who was so kind, respectful, and understanding. John shared that he wouldn't casually get involved with someone without genuine care. He wanted his partner to be fully committed. He asked if I was ready for that level of commitment. I assured him that I was. Over time, our connection grew stronger. We learned to support and understand each other, and our bond only deepened with every passing day. Eventually, John told me that he loved me, and I told him the same. That moment solidified our relationship as something truly special. Our journey together became a beautiful story of mutual respect, care, and love. The following day, I arrived at work feeling ecstatic. It was obvious to everyone that I was on cloud nine. Eventually, Joni caught up with me, gave me a serious gaze, and warned, "If you break his heart, I will kill you." Then she added, "Now come give me a hug." From that moment forward, John and I became inseparable. I abandoned my dream of becoming a doctor's wife for something far better. We dated for a year, and each day, my love for him grew beyond what I had ever imagined. My parents adored him, and I believe John's mother loved me as well. Joni had really warmed up to me and even apologized for her initial reluctance to set me up with John. One day at work, Joni informed me that an ambulance was arriving and that we needed to prepare a suite for the patient. The paramedics brought in a stretcher, and to my shock, John was lying on it. I almost passed out. I rushed over and exclaimed, "Oh my God, what's wrong?" When John sat up, he said, "I am tired of not being with you." "Will you marry me?" I was completely taken aback and stood there for a moment as the entire ER fell silent. Tears welled up in my eyes as I realized John was proposing. I jumped into his arms, nodding since I couldn't find the words. He held the ring out and said, "Carrie, say something." Finally, I managed to say, "YES." We got married, and I moved into a house with John and his mother. It wasn't an issue since the house was spacious. Joni and her husband also lived on the farm, but in a separate residence. Soon after, I became pregnant with our twin boys. John's mother was incredible and assisted me with the children, allowing me to return to work after weaning them. A few years later, I was pregnant again, this time expecting a girl. John's mother was there to help once more. Every day, I thanked God for the wonderful life I had. My decline, a decade of wonderful years had gone by, and we had established a comfortable routine. Both John and I were still employed, and on his days off, John managed the farm alongside Joni's husband. John's mother continued to live with us, gradually slowing down as she aged. I can't quite comprehend how everything unraveled, because I felt happy and secure within my family. John and I still shared incredible intimacy, and I remained deeply in love and enamored with him. I suppose it began when some of the younger nurses started going out for drinks after work and invited me to join them. Joni always declined, believing that a married woman shouldn't be in a bar without her husband. I never concerned myself with it, confident in my love for John, and believing that nothing could come between us. So, a few times each week, I would stop by for a drink or two before heading home. One evening, while out with the girls, I bumped into Dr. Ben Wilson. Ben and I had dated for a while during his training, and he was one of the few doctors I had actually been intimate with. He had moved out of state for work, so we had stopped seeing each other. Now he was back in the area. We chatted and updated each other on our lives. I shared details about mine, and he mentioned that he was in the process of getting a divorce. He had married a nurse, but according to Ben, she had been unfaithful. Ben complimented me on remaining attractive even after having 3 children. He was courteous and kind, doing nothing to raise any suspicions on my part. It felt like every time the girls and I went out for drinks, Ben would appear. He was always polite and friendly. Yes, he gave me compliments, but I never felt he was crossing any boundaries. Occasionally, he would ask me to dance, and I would, opting only for the faster songs. One night, while out with the girls, Ben came in and began buying us all drinks. He mentioned that his divorce was finalized and that he was celebrating. I ended up drinking more than usual that night and lost track of time. Ben asked me to dance, and I agreed. We danced 3 fast songs before a slow song played. I turned to leave the dance floor, but Ben grabbed my arm, spun me around, pulled me close, and said, "Please, like old times, I could really use a friend today." So I continued dancing with him. Maybe it was the alcohol, I'm not sure, but I should have recognized the warning signs. As we danced, he shared how depressed he was because of his divorce, and how, despite her infidelity, he felt like a failure. He genuinely needed a friend and didn't know anyone in town yet. I stayed, drank more, and danced longer. When it was time to leave, I had consumed more than I should have, and realized I wasn't in a state to drive. I stepped outside to clear my mind, and Ben followed me. It was a bit chilly, so Ben draped his arm around me. He leaned in and kissed me, and I found myself kissing him back. He led me to his car, and we got into the back seat. Things escalated, and I began to feel increasingly uncomfortable. I told Ben to stop, but he didn't listen. I struggled and called out for help. Thankfully, my friends, who were nearby, intervened and pulled Ben out of the car. The police were called, and I reported what had happened. At the hospital, I gave my statement to detectives while undergoing a medical exam. Although I had been clear about not consenting, some witnesses said they saw me with Ben earlier in the evening, which complicated the situation. The district attorney explained that while he believed my account, it might be difficult to prove the case in court due to the circumstances and conflicting perceptions. John, my husband, was understandably upset when I recounted the incident. He supported me at first, but struggled with the emotional fallout. Over the next few weeks, the tension in our relationship grew. Family members tried to console me, but also expressed their own judgments about my decision to go out that evening. It was a challenging time, and I felt isolated, even as I tried to navigate the legal and emotional aftermath. Ultimately, the district attorney decided not to pursue charges, citing insufficient evidence to prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt. This decision deeply affected me, as I felt I had no control over the situation and now faced its lasting consequences. John became increasingly distant, eventually moving out of the house. He remained involved with our children and continued supporting the household, but our relationship was fractured. I sought counseling to help me process everything, but John was unwilling to participate in efforts to repair our marriage. Despite my attempts, the divorce proceeded, and I was left to rebuild my life. Through counseling, I began to understand the importance of setting boundaries and advocating for myself. I also had to come to terms with the fact that John might never forgive me or trust me again. While I still love him, I now focus on being the best parent I can for our children and finding strength in my support network. The following few sessions with Mike focused on moving forward, even though that was the last thing I wanted. Mike suggested observing me in a social setting to better understand my behavior. While this approach was new to me, I agreed to go out with him on Friday. We planned to meet at his office, and he offered to drive. He mentioned it would help him understand my reactions in such environments. On Friday, we went to a club in a neighboring town. I had a few drinks, and Mike encouraged me to dance. After a while, we sat down, and he brought me another drink. The next thing I remember, I woke up in the hospital. A police officer was by my side, asking for my statement, but I was too shocked to respond. The following morning, a detective explained that someone had witnessed suspicious behavior from Mike, which led to authorities intervening before anything worse happened. Mike had admitted to inappropriate intentions, but thanks to the Good Samaritan's actions, he was stopped, and the authorities arrived in time. This experience deeply affected me, and I found myself struggling emotionally. Thankfully, with the support of my friend Joni and my mom, I decided to focus on moving forward. I also agreed to proceed with the divorce, even though I still hoped for reconciliation with John. I just needed time to heal. When we returned to court, the judge expressed hesitation about granting the divorce immediately. I told the judge I wanted the divorce because John no longer seemed to trust or love me as he once did. To my surprise, the judge revealed something unexpected. "Carrie, it was John who ensured your safety that night. He had a recorder placed in your purse and was at the bar to protect you. If he didn't care about you, he wouldn't have taken those actions." The judge decided to grant the divorce under one condition. It would only become final after 1 year if the two of us couldn't reconcile. Additionally, if either of us entered into a relationship with someone else during that time, the divorce would be finalized immediately, as it would indicate a lack of commitment to saving the marriage. The worst day of my life. Here I am, feeling somewhat caught between different phases of my life. I'm working, taking care of the kids, trying to gather my thoughts, and keeping most of my emotions about John to myself. I've started seeing a new counselor and am gradually beginning to regain control of my life. At least John is communicating with me now and remains polite in our interactions. I told John that I still care about him deeply and that I'm willing to do whatever it takes to rebuild our connection. I made it clear that if the divorce proceeds, it would be his decision, not mine. I also explained that although I made mistakes, I never intended to hurt him or anyone else. I assured him of my commitment to our vows and my hope for a positive resolution. John responded that we would take things one step at a time and left it at that. At work, some of the younger nurses would occasionally comment on John whenever he visited the ER. I always reminded them to be respectful, even though John and I were separated. It was clear to everyone how much I valued him, even in challenging times. Then came the day that truly tested me. I was working in the ER when the fire dispatch alerted us to prepare for multiple casualties from a building fire. One of the deputies mentioned that a large apartment building was engulfed in flames on the west side of town. I knew John was on heavy rescue duty that day and would likely be responding to the scene. The deputy also mentioned that a news helicopter was overhead, providing a live feed of the situation. My co-worker Joni and I went to the lounge to watch the broadcast, as her husband was the captain on John's rescue team. The scene was chaotic. The building was fully ablaze, and we could see rescue teams working tirelessly to save lives. Then, the unthinkable happened. The roof collapsed. The reporter on the live feed speculated that firefighters might still be inside. Moments later, the live broadcast was abruptly cut off. The news anchor explained that their station policy was to stop showing coverage of potential injuries until families had been notified. One of the deputies working security in the ER switched his radio to the fire department's frequency, capturing everyone's attention. The radio crackled with messages: beep, beep, beep. Attention all units responding to the Maple Street fire, evacuate the building and perform a PAR, Personnel Accountability Report. We listened closely as the updates came in. Sector A to command, we have accounted for all personnel. Sector B to command, we have accounted for all personnel. Sector C to command, we are still conducting the PAR. Sector D to command, we have accounted for all personnel. Command to Sector C, do you have all personnel accounted for? Sector C negative. We are missing 4 individuals. Heavy Rescue 1 is unaccounted for. Joni and I felt our eyes well up with tears when we heard the distressing call that sent a chill down our spines. Mayday! 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 Rescue 1 is trapped. We have firefighters down. Mayday! 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 Command to Rescue 1. What is your location? Command, we are on the 2nd floor of Sector C near the back wall. A roof collapse has trapped us in the first apartment of Sector D. Copy that. Hold tight. Command to dispatch. Initiate an all call and activate the 4th and 5th alarms. Deploy all resources to Sector C and send 2 rapid intervention teams RIT. Additionally, dispatch 5 more medic units. Dispatch copies. By this point, both Joni and I were in tears, with everyone around trying to comfort us. It felt like an eternity before the next radio transmission came through. Command from RIT-1. We are receiving multiple man-down alarms and are approaching the scene. Command from RIT-1. We have located Rescue 1. We are extracting 3 individuals, but 1 is heavily trapped. RIT-2. Please assist. Command to RIT-2. Assist RIT-1. Over. Command to medic units. I need my team out of there immediately. We waited anxiously. About 10 more minutes later, the hospital's medic radio came alive. Medic 3 to county. Go ahead, Medic 3. Medic 3, we are en route to your facility with a semi-conscious 24-year-old male firefighter who was trapped in a roof collapse during a structure fire. The patient is suffering from severe smoke inhalation. Vital signs are stable. We are sending telemetry and will treat according to protocol. County to Medic 3. Copy that. Per Dr. Fields, administer the cyanide antidote. What is the patient's last name? Medic 3 copies. Patient's name is Miller, ETA 7 minutes. Then we heard another transmission. Medic 7 to County. County, go ahead. Medic 7, we have a 43-year-old firefighter with similar conditions as Medic 3's patient. We are sending telemetry and following protocol with an ETA of 8 minutes. We will begin the antidote unless you advise otherwise. Patient's name is Wilson. Clearing radio as other units will follow. Medic 7 to County. Copy and proceed as instructed. At this moment, Joni became alert. It was her husband. The chief ER doctor informed Joni and me that we were being relieved from duty and that ICU would take over our responsibilities. We remained on standby, knowing that Joni was still out there. Then the next call came through. Medic 4 to County, we have a 28-year-old firefighter who is conscious and alert. We are treating him for smoke inhalation and will follow protocol and administer the antidote. ETA 8 minutes. Patient's name is Hadlock. I collapsed to the ground, fully aware that it was my John who remained trapped. Everyone attempted to console me, and even Joni was shattered once more. Joni began shouting, "This isn't fair! First my father, and now my brother." We were led into a room where the hospital's chaplain soon joined us. We listened intently, hoping for any updates. Ambulances began arriving, and Joni and I rushed to her husband. By then, he had regained consciousness. He looked at Joni with tears in his eyes and said, "John saved us. John saved us all. But we couldn't reach him. I'm so sorry. It's just like when your dad saved us years ago. Baby, I am so sorry. I know I promised I wouldn't let anything happen to him." Then the doctors ushered us out of the room. I turned to Joni and said, "I didn't know your dad had saved your husband." Joni nodded and added, "The last thing he said was, 'You're not going to make my daughter a widow. Tell her and my wife that I love them.'" It had deeply affected him for a while. I prayed fervently that John wouldn't die, fearing it would devastate him once more. Then the radio crackled to life again. Medic 1 to County. "County, go ahead, Medic 1. County, we are en route to your facility with a 34-year-old firefighter in VFib. CPR has been initiated. The patient is intubated, and we have 2 IVs in place. We are following VFib protocols. The patient also has a fractured right femur, and we suspect head, spine, and hip injuries. Estimated arrival time is 7 minutes. Patient's name is Walker. As a nurse, I understood from the radio update that John's chances of survival were slim. Anyone in cardiac arrest due to trauma before reaching the hospital has roughly a 1% survival rate. At that moment, I was praying to God and making every possible plea with the Almighty to save John's life, not for myself, but for the children. I felt I had missed my chance, so for the first time, my concern wasn't my own happiness, but someone else's. I noticed the fire department chaplain entering the room. He saw me and approached to comfort Joni and me. The ambulance arrived, and they swiftly extracted John from the back. I observed that no one was performing CPR. I tried to move towards him when I heard a medic say, "We got his heart rate back," as they rushed him into the trauma room. Joni and I followed, but we weren't allowed inside. Doctors and nurses were busy examining and treating him. An X-ray machine noisily moved through the doorway. I had never seen so many doctors in one room before. The trauma surgeon, cardiologist, pulmonologist, renal specialist, orthopedist, radiologist, and our brain surgeon were all present. While the X-ray team did their work, the ER doctor spoke with Joni and me. He explained that he couldn't provide any information until the X-rays were completed. He mentioned that John was unconscious and his prognosis was bleak. Joni and I embraced each other when I saw the fire department chaplain take out a purple stole. I recognized it as a symbol used for administering last rites. I shouted at him, "No." He approached, took my hand, and calmly said, "Carrie and Joni, I want to give John his last rites. This doesn't mean he won't survive, but if God decides to take John to be with his father, he would appreciate having his loved ones by his side when that happens." Then he looked directly at me and said, "Carrie, don't ever think that John doesn't love you. He and I have had many conversations about your situation, and I can assure you he has never stopped loving you." Around that time, John's mother entered the ER. We updated her on John's condition and informed her that the chaplain wanted to perform last rites. We encouraged her to wait outside. She looked at us and said, "When the fire department car arrived, I already knew. Don't forget, the chaplain and I have been here before. I've already buried my husband, and if God chooses, I will bury my son." We all entered the room, which was now quiet, except for the heart monitor's steady beeping. I positioned myself on his left, while Joni stood on his right, holding both his and Mom's hands as the chaplain administered the last rites. For a fleeting moment, I thought I felt him squeeze my hand. Once the chaplain concluded, we stepped outside where the ER chief approached us. He explained, "We've received the x-rays and determined that he has no injuries to his head, neck, spine, or pelvis. However, he has a severe fracture in his right femur and is losing blood. We want to operate, but we're concerned his heart is still too weak. We'll attempt to stabilize him and, if all goes well, perform surgery tomorrow. We've initiated a blood drive since we'll need a significant amount to keep him stable until we can operate. As he regains strength, he should wake up on his own." They transferred John to the ICU. I told Mom that I needed to fetch the kids, but she responded, "Don't worry about the children. They're fine. You need to stay with your husband." I hung my head in shame. Mom lifted my chin and said, "You might have broken his trust before, but he needs you now. Don't break it again." Looking directly into Mom's eyes, I promised, "Mom, I swear I will never hurt your son again. I will be there for him until the day I die." She kissed my forehead. I went to the cafeteria to get coffee for Joni and me. I was taken aback by a long line that stretched down the hallway into a waiting room filled with firefighters and police officers waiting at the blood bank. Tears welled up in my eyes as I truly grasped what it means to trust that your partner will be there for you. This was the reason John and I hadn't made progress in reconciling. I hadn't understood the depth of trust I had broken. These firefighters, John's partners, always had his back and would never betray him, but I had. Now I understand. I went to the chapel to pray and made a promise to God that I would earn John's trust back and never betray it again. Joni spent the night with her husband, and I stayed by John's bedside. My parents came over to pick up the kids, and everyone agreed to return for the surgery. By morning, John had regained some strength and was beginning to wake up. As they were preparing to take him to surgery, he reached out to me. I leaned in to kiss him as he whispered, "Carrie, I forgive you." "Will you forgive me?" I replied. "Yes, John, I will, and I still love you." Then he added, "I wish I had taken you up on the friends with benefits thing, as I think it's going to be a long time before I can have intimacy again." I don't know why, but tears welled up again. They wheeled him into surgery. After only 3 hours, the doctor emerged to address everyone. With a broad smile, he announced, "The surgery was successful. You'll be able to see him in a few hours." He further explained that, barring any complications, John would stay in the hospital for the next couple of weeks before going home. He would be in a waist and leg cast with limited mobility for another 8 to 10 weeks and wouldn't be able to climb stairs, making his apartment unsuitable. I responded, "John will move back into the house. I'll take FMLA and care for him." Mom patted my hand, and Joni smiled. The Cheater's Handbook. The following days flew by in a whirlwind. John was recovering well, and I did my best to stay by his side as much as possible. Despite needing to work and take care of the children, I always made time to visit him before work, during my breaks, and even stopped by again before heading home. John barely seemed to notice my presence since he was constantly receiving visitors. News of his heroic actions had spread to the media, attracting attention from journalists, politicians, well-wishers, firefighters, and their families, leaving me with little alone time with him. A few days after the surgery, things began to settle down. As I walked towards the nurses' station to visit John, I overheard the nurses talking. They hadn't seen me, and I chose not to interrupt, continuing towards John's room. I caught part of their conversation, and though I didn't hear all the details, it was clear that John's bravery had made quite the impression. I entered John's room, thinking to myself, no matter what happens, I'm going to fight for our family. John was still asleep, so I leaned in to kiss his forehead gently, wishing for his quick recovery. Later at lunch, John was awake. When I walked in, he said, "Carrie, they tell me that when they discharge me, I'm going home, and you're going to take FMLA. You know you don't have to do that. I'll be fine." I noticed his eyebrows furrow and said, "Listen to me. I broke your trust once. I don't know why, but it's never going to happen again. I will fulfill my duty to you until you decide to let me go. I know it doesn't mean the divorce is off, but until then, I will be there for you. I now understand the gravity of breaking your trust." John replied, "Do you now?" I noticed that every time I visited John, a particular nurse seemed especially attentive to him, always checking in and even visiting him on her days off. While I appreciated the care he was receiving, I couldn't help but feel protective of our relationship. The next morning, I arrived early to spend some quiet time with John. I brought his favorite homemade breakfast and sat beside him, sharing stories from home and making plans for his recovery. I promised him I would be by his side every step of the way, determined to rebuild what we had lost. As the days passed, I stayed focused on supporting John through his recovery, determined to show him that I had learned from my mistakes. While I couldn't control how others might feel about him, I knew my actions would speak louder than words. My priority was to prove that our family was worth fighting for, no matter how challenging the road ahead might be. From that day on, I made it a priority to show John care and attention every day. It was a way to rebuild some semblance of normalcy and support him through his recovery. Eventually, John was allowed to return home. The fire department brought him back in an ambulance, and the team helped rearrange the house so John could stay comfortably on the first floor. We moved our large bed to a more accessible area, and the children were overjoyed to have their father home again. The first night together felt a bit awkward. John wanted to have a serious conversation. He expressed concern about us sharing a room, worried it might confuse the kids. He admitted that while I had forgiven him, he still struggled to move past everything that had happened. I acknowledged his feelings, but left the room briefly to compose myself. My mother, always a source of wisdom, comforted me and suggested that I explain to John the importance of staying close in case he needed assistance during the night. We agreed that we'd address any questions from the children when the time was right. Taking her advice, I returned to the room. That night marked the first time we had spent together in over a year. With only 3 months left until our divorce was set to be finalized, I found myself juggling a lot of emotions. I requested a 3-month extension from the court, explaining that John's recovery was the priority. Since John agreed, the judge approved the request. During this period, John's condition steadily improved, giving me time to reflect. I realized how unprepared I had been for certain challenges in life, and began researching how people become vulnerable to manipulation. Inspired by my findings, I started an online support group for individuals who had faced similar struggles. The stories I read were eye-opening and motivated me to write a book aimed at helping others recognize and avoid manipulative tactics. I titled it, The Cheater's Handbook. After completing the manuscript, I worked with a publisher who helped refine it. The book was eventually published and became an unexpected success, even making its way onto bestseller lists. The support and encouragement I received were overwhelming, and I was invited to appear on The Ellen Show to discuss my journey. 6 months later, the day of my appearance on The Ellen Show coincided with the finalization of our divorce. While I didn't have to attend court due to the formal nature of the proceedings, the weight of the situation lingered. Despite everything, John reminded me that he hadn't forgotten the past, even if he had moved forward. On the show, Ellen greeted me warmly, and we talked about the book and the experiences that led me to write it. I shared my hope that the book could empower others to protect themselves from situations that might harm their relationships or personal well-being. I spoke about my once happy marriage and the deep love I had for my husband, explaining how unexpected challenges had led to its unraveling. Ellen, ever the empathetic host, asked how I was coping and moving forward. I replied that my focus was on being the best parent possible to my children and ensuring they grew up understanding the value of love and resilience. Ellen gently suggested that I might be too hard on myself. I responded, "Maybe, but as of today, when the divorce becomes official, I still love my husband with all my heart. Deep down, I know he loves me too, but trust is the foundation of any relationship." Without it, even the strongest love can falter. The audience's warmth and understanding reminded me that every journey, no matter how difficult, is an opportunity for growth and learning. Ellen then inquired, "What advice would you offer our audience?" I responded, "Firstly, you might not agree with me, but if you're in a relationship or married, avoid going to bars unless your husband accompanies you. These places are frequented by seducers looking for casual encounters, implying that if you're there without your husband, you're fair game. Bars aren't the only venues to be cautious of. But remember, if you wouldn't do something in front of your husband, it's likely best to refrain. Secondly, if any man attempts to belittle your husband to you or in your presence, he likely has malicious intentions and is trying to create discord in your relationship." Ellen then asked, "If you could say anything to your husband right now, what would it be?" I replied, "I would express my deep regret and assure him that, regardless of what happens, my love for him remains unwavering." Unexpectedly, Ellen added, "To be fair, there are women who might believe your husband is at fault. After all, you did try to prevent the situation, but were compelled to break your vows. I'd like to give him an opportunity to share his thoughts with you." At that moment, the TV screen for the audience and a monitor in front of me lit up, revealing John. He began, "Hi, Ellen. I want to congratulate Carrie on her book's success and share something with her." Suddenly, the screen went static, and both the picture and sound became distorted. Ellen turned to the producers and asked, "What's going on?" They replied, "Just give us a moment. We've lost the signal." Unbeknownst to me, John had been in the studio the entire time. While I was waiting, he quietly approached me from behind. I then heard John speak through the monitors as if he were right beside me. "Carrie, I want you to know that I still love you and wish to have you back in my life, if you'll let me." Overwhelmed, I began to cry, unable to speak, though I nodded my head. Eventually, I managed to say, "Nothing in my life is more important to me than having you back." Ellen responded, "Don't just say it. Turn around and tell John yourself." I turned around to find John standing there. I sprang into his arms so quickly that he was surprised, and we both stumbled together. Tears streamed down my face as I kissed him, promising to make him truly happy. The audience erupted in cheers and applause, which seemed to last forever. Ellen then announced, "Carrie, you were mistaken. Fairy tales do come true. To help create your own, we're sending you and John on a fairy tale honeymoon to the City of Love, Paris, France. Additionally, although today marks the finalization of your divorce, that's not the case, as John halted the process a month ago. Finally, to reaffirm your marriage commitment, the very judge who refused to give up on you is here to renew your wedding vows, if that's what you want." John renewed our vows in front of a live studio audience. He flew in his mother, our children, my parents, as well as his sister and her husband to the studio. When he found out I was going to appear on The Ellen Show, he reached out to her to share his plans. For the past month, everyone knew that John was coming home except for me. Later, John explained that he chose this approach because of my selfless decision to share my story in order to protect others, even though it exposed me to potential public criticism. He wanted to make an equally powerful declaration of his love for me. John has fully recovered and returned to work. He had already given up his apartment, and we moved the bed back into our bedroom. The kids are thrilled to have their dad home, and as for me, I'm still ensuring that little Miss Hot Pants Nurse doesn't gain anything from John. John now says he works primarily to get some rest. I'm not upset that John went back to the fire department. Absolutely not. The world needs more real men like John and all the firefighters out there. While I worry about what might happen, I feel secure knowing that we are loved. I trust his firefighter siblings to keep each other safe. I understand what it takes to trust, and that represents the ultimate commitment to one another. I hold that same commitment to John and our family. Our honeymoon was fantastic. By the time we returned, neither John nor I could walk properly. I just got home from work today and have some additional news for John. It looks like the farm is expanding. I'm pregnant again, and the doctor believes we'll be having twins once more. Ellen would like an update on our lives, and I think I'll share the news with John during the live feed update.